When I woke up, Mark said flatly, "You're pregnant." Before I could even process it, he added, "The child is almost certainly mine, and I intend for it to be raised in the Mark family. Once you give birth, you'll have fulfilled your side of our arrangement. You can choose to leave or we can live separate lives." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" He wanted the kid but not the mother. "Is that it?" I sat up in bed with a cold laugh. "I'll raise the child. In fact, I can leave today." Then I threw one last parting shot at him. "I must have been blind to have ever fallen for a scumbag like you." Mark froze. He grabbed my arm. "What did you just say?" "I didn't hear you." I yanked my arm away. "I said you're a scumbag." He grabbed me again. The sentence before that. I wrenched free once more. That I must have been blind. Mark and I had a private, unannounced marriage. The purpose was simple: to merge our family's business interests so completely that we could cooperate without suspicion. It's common in our world. For the sake of profit, children are bound by marriage. Once a baby is born, the couple goes their separate ways, only to reunite as a family when the child is old enough to be married off in the next generation's strategic alliance. When I married Mark, I was just a month out of a devastating breakup. A relationship I'd chosen for myself had left me shattered, so I numbly accepted my family's suggestion of an arranged marriage. On our wedding night, after we'd consummated the marriage, Mark got up and left the room. I assumed he was going to sleep in a separate bedroom, just like my parents did. But a few moments later, he returned with a warm towel and began to gently wipe the sweat from my forehead. "You must be tired. Can I get you a glass of warm milk?" I looked up in surprise, my eyes meeting his handsome face. He was watching me with such patience and care that, for a second, I thought I saw a flicker of genuine tenderness in his eyes. It was like we were a normal married couple. I was so stunned I just stared at him. In my daze, my mouth fell slightly open. I just shook my head, which made Mark chuckle. He stroked my hair. "It's late. Let's get some sleep." With that, he lay down beside me, wrapped an arm around my waist, and fell asleep. I was completely terrified. Was his family planning a corporate takeover? Were they after some other part of my family's business? Why else would he be acting like this toward a woman he'd married purely for convenience? The next morning, I couldn't stand it anymore and went to confront him. All I got was a sharp look. "We're married. Is it wrong for a husband to take care of his wife?" I was at a loss for words. He was right. An arranged marriage was still a marriage. I gave him a weak smile. "Are you heading to the office now?" He fastened the last button on his shirt and patted my head again. "I have a work dinner tonight. You should get ready." I mumbled an okay and, after he left, I sat alone, staring blankly into the vast emptiness of the villa. I used to work at an art gallery as an agent for my boyfriend, who was an up-and-coming painter. An artiste. Turns out he was also doing women. Specifically, my coworker. After he cheated on me and humiliated me, I quit in a fit of anger and went home to get married. Now I was a housewife with nothing to do, feeling completely hollow. It was worse than working. I finally made it to the evening. I put on makeup, got dressed up, and went with Mark to an art exhibition hosted by a local artist, where we were expected to donate to a local arts foundation. I held on to Mark's arm, mingling with the crowd. After a few steps, I felt someone's eyes on me. I followed the gaze and saw my ex, Julian, standing a short distance away, a glass of wine in his hand and a smirk on his face. Standing next to him was the coworker he'd cheated on me with. I turned away without expression and pretended to study a painting on the wall. It was only then that I realized the exhibition was Julian's. Mark sensed something was wrong and leaned in, whispering in my ear, "What is it?" I didn't know how to answer. I didn't want to bring up my pathetic ex, especially not when we were newly married. But even if I didn't bring him up, my pathetic ex decided to stroll over himself. He raised his glass to us. "Chloe. Found a new boyfriend?" Not bad. I didn't even want to speak to him. I just snorted and tried to pull Mark away. But Mark didn't move. Instead, he reached out and shook my ex's hand. And you are? Her old flame, Julian said casually, with that particular brand of artistic detachment about relationships, completely ignoring Mark's presence. Things like responsibility, boundaries, respect, they were all meaningless in Julian's liberated, artistic soul. Freedom was all that mattered. Mark just nodded and smiled. How charmingly naive. Nice. Then, taking my hand, he slowly led me away, and we continued to admire the art. He never asked me a single question about Julian. I tried to explain, but he just smiled. Falling for a clueless idiot wasn't your fault. No need to explain. I wasn't expecting that reaction, but I felt a small sense of relief. The next day, I heard Julian's art exhibition had been abruptly shut down. No amount of calling in favors could get it reopened. Julian called me, furious. Is your new boyfriend that powerful? Have you sold out and become a gold digger? I remember you used to be such a free spirit. I burst out laughing. And whose fault is that? If you hadn't cheated on me, I never would have had the chance to be a gold digger. After hanging up, I went into the kitchen and cooked Mark a huge meal to thank him for giving Julian a taste of his own medicine and helping me get my revenge. When Mark got home that evening, he saw me sitting under the warm glow of a lamp, dressed in a silk robe, with a table full of hot food waiting for him. He paused, and the look in his eyes deepened. How's the food? I asked with a grin. He picked up his chopsticks, took a bite, and asked nonchalantly as he chewed, Are you free, later tonight? They say a full stomach leads to other desires, but dude, we just started eating. Seeing my silence, Mark made the decision for me. Tonight, I'm canceling my video conference. We're going to bed early. That night, I did not, in fact, get to bed early. I was completely exhausted by 11, and Mark had to carry me to the shower. Weak and drowsy, I scrunched up my face. We're going to have a baby really fast at this rate, you know. Mark paused. I've thought about it. But if you don't want to have one, I can take precautions. I was shocked. I had just blurted it out, but we both knew that our alliance needed a child to be truly secure. Are you kidding? I didn't believe him for a second. Mark whispered in my ear, I'm serious. As long as you can be your old self again, bold and bright, and not walk around with that sad look on your face. As I drifted off to sleep, my hazy mind vaguely wondered how he knew what my old self was like. We'd only ever been nodding acquaintances before this. Mark and I had never really moved in the same circles. He was the golden boy of our world, the kid everyone's parents compared their own children to. I was a nobody, so far on the fringe I might as well have been invisible. God knows I was just looking for an escape when I agreed to the marriage, but somehow I ended up with a catch like Mark. It drove all the girls in our circle, the ones richer and prettier than me, absolutely insane. If they knew how tender he was after we slept together, they'd probably try to strangle me. I snuggled deeper into his arms, a small smile on my lips. I didn't take his gentle words to heart. We both grew up in this world. Who hadn't seen their parents with secret second families, or an illegitimate child suddenly appearing to claim their inheritance? It was the fate of these arranged marriages. It was unchangeable. If I fell for a few sweet words, either I was an idiot, or he'd cast some kind of spell on me. I closed my eyes and drifted off. A body this good was a definite perk. Touching was earning. It was the only upside to this whole marriage. I slept soundly in Mark's arms until morning, waking up to discover I'd drooled on his arm in my sleep. I scrambled out of bed, embarrassed by the amused look on his face, and went to get ready. Then, dressed respectably, I went to the Mark family home for dinner to be formally introduced as their daughter-in-law. The Marks were all remarkably good-looking and well-mannered. The meal was actually pleasant. After dinner, Mark and his older brother went to the study to talk business. The rest of us sat in the living room, making small talk. A TV show was playing in the background, but no one was watching except for Mark's little niece, Lily. A few minutes later, Lily let out a shriek, pointing at the screen. "Auntie Chloe. That's Auntie Chloe." Everyone fell silent. In perfect unison, we all turned to stare at the television. Lily was still bouncing with excitement. "Auntie Chloe is on TV." I raised an eyebrow. Well, what a coincidence. A flash of panic crossed Mark's sister-in-law's face. She pulled Lily into her lap and stuffed a cookie in her mouth. "Here, eat this. You must be hungry." Lily, forced to chew, tried to point at the screen again, but another cookie was pressed into her hand. The rest of the room was silent. A heavy, awkward silence. Even the maids tiptoed around, their faces strained. Only I seemed to be enjoying myself, propping my chin on my hand as I watched, commenting on the ridiculous plot and amateurish costumes before remarking casually, "You know, for an actress to pull off that awful Barbie pink lipstick, she must be seriously gorgeous." Lily swallowed her cookie and clapped her hands. "That's Auntie Chloe." Her mother, looking desperate, shoved a piece of chocolate into her mouth and gave me a helpless look. You know how kids can be, a little dumb. I couldn't help but laugh. Just then, the show ended, and I glanced at the credits. The lead actress, Mona. I knew of Mona. She had amazing resources, landing leading roles from her debut without ever playing a supporting character, and she had a ton of endorsement deals. If her acting wasn't so wooden, she'd probably be the biggest star in the country by now. Rumor had it she had a rich backer. And now I knew it was true. I also knew who the backer was. I silently congratulated myself for not taking last night's tenderness seriously. That would have been beyond stupid. You don't fall into the same trap twice. A moment later, Mark came out of the study. He saw the bizarre scene in the living room, everyone watching me nervously while I watched the TV with genuine interest. Not knowing what had happened, he just stroked my hair. "Good show?" "Great," I nodded. "Really great." Lily tried to say something, but her mother clamped a hand over her mouth and carried her away. I squinted at Mark's handsome face and smiled. "Don't you have another party tonight?" Mark nodded and led me out of the house, letting his family off the hook and saving them from any more awkwardness on my account. Tonight's party was really just a chance for Mark's close friends to meet me. When we walked into the private room, it was already buzzing with a crowd of beautiful people. They all stood up when they saw us, calling out a greeting. But I also heard whispers drift my way. "She's not as pretty as Mona." I knew I was more cute than stunning. But who cared? I smiled, found a corner seat, and planned to lay low until it was over. Mark, however, walked straight over and sat down next to me. With him there, the corner was no longer a corner. It was the center of attention. Everyone saw what he did, and the whispers immediately stopped. Instead, they started coming over, enthusiastically toasting me. But Mark didn't let me drink a single drop. He took every glass from me. He leaned in, his breath smelling faintly of whiskey. "This stuff is strong. It'll upset your stomach. Next time, when we're having red wine, I'll let you have a little." I nodded, and I saw a few jaws drop around the room. Someone started jeering. Man, Mark's never been this nice to anyone. He was so distant even with a beauty like Mona. Who knew he'd ever be the guy to drink for a girl? Ah! It was like someone had pinched him. He yelped in pain. Mark glanced at him coolly. "Go outside and sober up. Don't come back." The guy knew he'd messed up and practically ran out of the room. The room fell silent again. Everyone was watching me cautiously, with the same look I'd seen on Mark's sister-in-law's face. My second-hand embarrassment kicked in. I tried to smooth things over with a cheerful grin. "Speaking of Mona, does anyone here know her? I'd love an introduction. I've always wanted to meet a celebrity." It didn't work. The room got even quieter. They were looking at me like I was the scorned wife about to confront the other woman. Mark patted the back of my hand. Don't worry about it. It's all just rumors. I nodded. Of course I didn't care. As long as my family's partnership with his was secure and my future inheritance grew, I was happy to ignore everything. But I had to admire Mark's ability to lie with a straight face. Even my own father couldn't pull that off. Dad would at least admit he was just playing the field, but he never had the nerve to claim it was all just rumors. I looked at Mark, tilted my head, and smiled. I believe you. My eyes were full of sincerity, a perfect performance of devotion and trust. It stunned the onlookers. Even the guy Mark had sent out to sober up, who was just opening the door to leave, froze in his tracks. He looked back at me with an expression of pure admiration. Then he turned and collided with the person standing in the doorway. That poor guy. He went down hard, sprawling on the floor. The person in the doorway chuckled, a pair of mischievous eyes crinkling at the corners. He reached down to help him up. Hey, kid. Haven't seen you in a few years. Did you forget how to walk? The voice was smooth and coolly charming, just like his smile. He was handsome, roguishly so, but with a chill that went straight to the bone. Like a premium version of Julian. I stared at that face, my mind a complete blank. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. I watched, frozen, as he walked over to me and held out his hand. Wild child. Congratulations on the wedding. Wild child. That was his special name for me. I stared at him, my first love, and instinctively started to raise my hand, but I had no idea what to say. Mark was faster. He intercepted his hand, shaking it firmly. Evan. Are you back for good this time? Evan's eyes were still on me, a smile playing on his lips. We'll see. I quickly turned away, poured myself a drink, and took a sip. Under Mark's gaze, I set the glass back down, giving myself 3 seconds to pull it together. Then I turned back to Evan and managed a smile. Long time no see. My composure didn't last long. 3 minutes after Evan walked in, I made an excuse and slipped out of the room. I stood by a window in the hallway, letting the cool air wash over me, trying to calm my racing heart. This man. I had loved him so deeply, and in return, he had given me nothing but cruelty. Just when I was most infatuated with him, he told me he didn't want to be tied down by a relationship, that my love was suffocating him. Then he left the country. It took me years to get over him. When I finally did, I found Julian, who looked a lot like him. When Julian cheated on me, it was like watching Evan walk away all over again. That's why I'd given up and agreed to the arranged marriage. Right now, I desperately needed a cigarette. I fumbled in my pockets, forgetting that I'd quit years ago. Suddenly, I heard the click of a lighter beside me, followed by the faint scent of mint-flavored smoke. I hadn't smelled that scent in years. It was Evan's favorite brand. I looked up. Evan was leaning against the wall, a cocky, unreadable smile on his face. Got married without telling anyone, huh? I nodded. What was I supposed to do? Wait for you forever? Evan let out a low laugh. And you married a top-tier guy like Mark. You must be happy. I shrugged. I am pretty happy. I looked at his familiar face and couldn't stop myself from asking, why did you suddenly come back? Evan stared out the window, took a deep drag of his cigarette, and gave me a lazy smile. I heard you got married. It suddenly hit me, damn, I'd really lost you for good this time. So I came back. I lowered my eyes. Whether that's true or not, it's too late. I'm married. Evan scoffed, as if I'd said something ridiculous. It's an arranged marriage. In our world, who takes those things seriously? I laughed mockingly. So you came all this way back to be the other man? For a moment, I still wanted to believe him. Evan took another drag. I haven't thought that far ahead. I just don't want to lose you. We'll figure out the rest later. I shook my head. There's nothing to figure out. My marriage is different. At the very least, as long as I didn't catch Mark cheating, I wouldn't cross any lines. I was determined to hold on to my principles until the very end. I left Evan by the window and turned to go back to the party. From behind me, I heard him let out a sigh. The old you would never have left me standing here alone. I turned back to look at him. But I'm married now. My husband's name is Mark. When I walked back into the room, I instinctively wrapped my arms around myself. A heavy pressure filled the air, and at the center of it was Mark. I sat down beside him and studied his face. He was downing his drinks, fast and hard. His eyes were red, and the cool gaze behind his gold-rimmed glasses was no longer gentle but fierce. When he saw me watching him, he lightly squeezed my hand. "It's cold out there, isn't it? Your hands are freezing." I nodded and nestled into his embrace. "It is." Just then, Evan pushed the door open. Mark's arm tightened around me, pulling me closer as he waved Evan over. "Come have a drink." Evan sauntered over. "Don't mind if I do." He glanced at me. "But maybe let Chloe go first. Your little lovey-dovey show is making a single guy like me feel a bit awkward." Mark held me even tighter. "As long as we're married, we're going to be in your face. And as long as you're in this country, you're just going to have to deal with it." He was smiling, but I could feel that same oppressive atmosphere building again. I was caught in the middle of it, just trying to survive until the night was over. Hours later, in the dead of night, it finally ended. Mark and Evan had drunk the room dry. Everyone else watched in stunned silence, muttering that it was just a few drinks, not a fight to the death. It ended in a stalemate. Both of them stumbled out of the room. Evan still had that reckless grin on his face. "I've always had good taste. I only go for treasures." He looked at me as he spoke. I was busy buttoning up Mark's coat to keep him from catching a chill in the night air. Evan suddenly sighed. "Except for that one time I messed up and threw away a priceless treasure." Mark wrapped his arm around me, shielding me from the wind, and smiled faintly. "That's why you can't have nice things. It would be a waste." The wind outside was bitingly cold, and I instinctively shrank into Mark's arms. It was a familiar embrace by now. He was always holding me, so the movement felt completely natural. Evan froze for a second, his smile vanishing. He asked slowly, "Mark, you jumped into this marriage so suddenly. Did you get things sorted out with Mona? I heard she was expecting to marry you." Mona again. I was getting tired of it. I knew what our marriage was, but did everyone have to mention her to me? I pulled away from Mark's embrace, but as soon as I stood up straight, he pulled me back in. He said, each word deliberate, "There is only Chloe." He gently stroked my hair. "There has only ever been Chloe." I forced a smile. "It's getting cold. Honey, let's go home." Mark nodded and guided me to the car. As we turned to leave, I noticed that the usual sparkle in Evan's eyes was gone. They were dull. Just like mine had been the day he left. On the way home, Mark closed his eyes to sober up. I didn't feel like talking either, so we drove in silence. After we got home and showered, I lay in bed, thinking. There were some things that needed to be said. I patted Mark. "This is an arranged marriage, right?" Mark paused. "Yes. So, if, and I'm just saying if, you want to live separate lives, I'm not against it. But I have conditions." Mark didn't even open his eyes. "Go on." "First, no illegitimate children. Second, you can't bring anyone home. And third, no public fights. All three would damage our family's partnership." I had summarized all the failed marriages in our circle and solemnly presented my 3 points. Mark slowly opened his eyes and stared at me. After a moment, he asked in a hoarse voice, "Is this what marriage means to you?" I looked down. "No. To me, marriage was holding hands until you were old and gray, one love for a lifetime. But that was for other people. Not for me." I let out a barely audible sigh and met his gaze. This is what our marriage means to me. Mark didn't speak, just watched me silently. I figured I'd already gone this far, so I might as well get it all out. Of course, if you're going to have fun on the side, then I have the right to pursue my own happiness too. But I'll make sure any children I have are yours. I know the rules. Mark's face was a mask as he leaned in close, his words a whisper in my ear. Everything you just said, I'm going to pretend it was just you farting. I frowned. I was being so sincere, and he was being so vulgar. Before I could respond, he rolled on top of me. Pissing me off this late at night, I think you need to be taught a lesson. What can I say? The lesson made me forget I was ever angry. I have to admit, Mark was a perfect husband. Sometimes I even found myself thinking that if we weren't part of this high society world, if we were just two normal people who had met, fallen in love, and gotten married, we could have been really happy. I was lost in this thought when Mark handed me a stack of papers. I don't like the idea of my wife being stuck at home. You can go back to work. The papers were the transfer documents for an art gallery. Mark had bought me a gallery. While I was still gaping at him, he stroked my head. This gallery isn't doing well, but I believe you can turn it around. I stared at him, dumbfounded. Wow. I don't even have that much faith in myself. Where does your confidence in me come from? Mark was very serious. You truly love art. I nodded. What does that have to do with my business skills? Mark calmly replied, when you love something, you throw yourself into it completely, like a moth to a flame. With that kind of passion and dedication, there's nothing you can't do. My mouth fell open. Where was he getting this from? The only person I'd ever thrown myself at like that was Evan. But Mark was already dressed, and he gently pinched my cheek. Besides, you'll have me to teach you. He seemed to be in a good mood, humming a little tune as he left for work. Better to give you something to do than have you dwelling on the past. I blinked. When was I dwelling on the past? The other day, Evan tried to add me on social media, and I hesitated for a second before declining. That was it. Otherwise, I hadn't thought about the past at all. But that 1 second of hesitation must have really pissed Mark off, because he dragged me to the bedroom and gave me a harsh lesson on how to stay focused. I was convinced he was losing his mind, but my aching back kept me from saying so. Now, looking at this failing gallery he'd given me, I wanted to cry. Was he under too much stress at work? His behavior was getting more and more erratic. But regardless, the gallery was mine now. I couldn't just let it fail, not with employees who depended on it for their livelihood. So, with a heavy heart, I started learning how to run a gallery, dealing with all sorts of people. Mark was a huge help. He even set aside time every night for a masterclass, teaching me about business, investment, management, and how to read people. My skills improved by leaps and bounds. Not because I was a genius, but because I was getting private, one-on-one tutoring from a master every night. I was suddenly grateful to my parents. They hadn't just found me a husband, they had enrolled me in a top business school with a personal tutor. My once dull life was suddenly bright and sunny again. Every evening, I found myself eagerly awaiting Mark's return. I even started to think that maybe, just maybe, an arranged marriage could lead to a lifetime of love. But just a few days after I had that thought, fate decided to teach me a lesson: stop daydreaming. It started on a calm, quiet afternoon when I got a frantic call from my mother. Your father has an illegitimate son, and he's causing a scene at the company. I froze. My first thought was, so, it's finally our turn. The sword of Damocles has fallen. My second thought was, is he here to fight for the inheritance? For the money I'm supposed to get? My third thought was, he wouldn't dare make a scene at the company unless Dad gave him the green light. In our world, whenever an illegitimate child caused a public scandal, it was always with the father's blessing. Otherwise, what was the point? The father could just disown them, and they wouldn't get a dime. I paused, then asked my mom, you didn't know Dad had another son? My mother's voice was filled with bitterness. He told me he had a vasectomy. I pressed my lips together, wanting to both cry and laugh. Growing up, I'd always watched other families fight over inheritances, terrified of the day it would happen to me. I had dreaded this for over 20 years. But now that it was actually happening, I wasn't scared anymore. I was just annoyed. Even the most elegant people turn into shameless animals when they're fighting over money, and now it was my turn to be the laughingstock. Thanks a lot, Dad, for this wonderful, crappy experience. This illegitimate son was aggressive. He knew how to play the victim and how to make threats, and he had my mom completely overwhelmed. I called my dad to negotiate. My father, a man who had been a tyrant his whole life, was suddenly playing the victim. Chloe, all men make mistakes. I made one, and I'll own up to it. But your brother is making such a scene, I can't control him. I laughed coldly. So what will it take to control him? Giving him half the family fortune? My dad went silent. I hung up, a heavy weight pressing on my chest. I could live without the money, but I couldn't accept my father's silence. I had always thought that, despite his affairs, he still loved me. After all, I was his only child. Now I knew I was just being naive. The scandal grew, and soon even Evan heard about it. He called me. Do you need my help? I laughed self-deprecatingly. If I can't do anything, what can you do? 2 days later, I found out what he could do. My dad called me, screaming. How could you hire someone to beat up my son? He's your brother. Do you think I won't have you thrown in jail for this? I was baffled. What are you talking about? Ricky. Your brother. My dad gasped, out of breath. He was beaten up, 2 broken ribs, he's in the hospital now. The guys who did it told him to disappear or they'd beat him up every day. If it wasn't you, who was it? He was furious. I've hired bodyguards for him. And I'm telling you right now, he gets half of everything, and no one can change that. No, wait, he gets more than half now. Go ahead, keep sending your thugs. See if I don't get you arrested. In that moment, my heart turned to ice. I didn't say a word in my defense. I just hung up. Evan called me again. If he makes a scene for 1 more day, I'll put him in the hospital for 1 more day. I have plenty of money. I can play this game as long as he wants. Exhausted, I hung up on him too. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming. I thought about calling Mark, who was on a business trip. I wanted to blame him for not being there for me, but then I remembered he was in the middle of a major deal and had no idea what was happening. He didn't have the energy for this kind of drama. So when he answered the phone, I sniffled and just asked, "When are you coming back?" "I kind of miss you." I missed his embrace. Mark paused. "What's wrong?" I forced a laugh. "Nothing. I just miss you." That phone call with my dad taught me a lot. I had my pride. I wouldn't take a single cent of his money. As for him, I didn't recognize him as my father anymore. But if my dad gave the inheritance to his illegitimate son, and I was no longer the heiress of the Luo family, would my marriage to Mark still stand? I couldn't help but ask, if I'm not rich one day, would we still be together? Mark laughed. "You're not richer than me now." I laughed too, then hung up, completely drained. I ignored everyone's calls. That night, my dad called me over a dozen times. I finally blocked his number. He drove over to the villa, but for some reason, several of Mark's bodyguards were standing outside, and they wouldn't let him in. Humiliated, my dad stood on the street, his face red as he shouted, "Chloe! My darling daughter! I told that bastard to go back to his hometown. You're the one and only heir to the Luo family." I must have lost my mind. The more I listened, the stranger it sounded. I stood at the window, watching him as he wrung his hands in desperation. "You have to tell Mark that the boy is gone. He's gone." Then he left, looking utterly defeated. I watched him go, feeling like I was looking at a complete stranger. I picked up my phone and called my mom. Why did Dad suddenly change his tune? My mom snorted. It was Mark. He called me to ask what was wrong with you, then he called your father and told him that if that illegitimate son hurt you in any way or took a single penny from you, the Mark and Luo families would no longer be partners. They would be enemies. There was a hint of envy in her voice. Your father is no match for the Mark family. He was scared to death. Chloe, Mark is a good man. You made the right choice marrying him. I was stunned. I never imagined Mark would go to such lengths for me. I couldn't help but be moved. So when Mark got back from his business trip that night, I cooked him a feast, with a heaping platter of oysters. Mark saw the oysters and laughed, then pulled me into the bedroom. No need for those. I'm still young. 2 hours later, my entire body ached. I had to admit, he really didn't need the oysters. I quickly cleared them from the table. If this was him without them, I couldn't even imagine what he'd be like with them. But I was sure of one thing, I had found happiness. My gallery was thriving. My husband doted on me. And even though I had seen my father's true colors, and my heartbroken mother had run off to Europe with a young new boyfriend, leaving me all alone, it didn't matter. I had Mark. The night my mom left for Europe, I felt a loneliness I had never known before. I felt like no one in the world loved me. I lay in bed, and after the lights were out, I let the tears fall silently. Mark wrapped his arms around me from behind, patting my back rhythmically like he was comforting a child. His calm voice was steady and strong. I'm here. Don't cry. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I turned and clung to him, sobbing as I asked, will you be faithful to me? Will you stay with me until we're old? I was desperate. My emotional world had crumbled, and Mark was the only thing I had left to hold on to. He pulled me close, my head resting on his chest. I could hear the steady beat of his heart and his low voice answering, I will. He said it with a solemn, reverent tone. And I believed him. The moonlight streamed through the window. In that moment, I heard the sound of my own heart falling in love. Mark quickly resolved the drama with my family, allowing me to return to my work at the gallery. I settled into a state of quiet happiness. I was smiling even when I was just walking down the street. But my pathetic ex, Julian, couldn't stand to see me happy. He showed up at my gallery, wanting to collaborate. I wanted to sick a dog on him, but a visitor was a visitor. I had to force a smile and tell him, there's no way I'm working with you. Go find a nice, cool place to stand and stay there. Julian gave me a smug, wicked grin. Still can't forget me, can you? I was so taken aback I was momentarily speechless. Luckily, someone else walked in just then, breaking the silence. Unfortunately, that someone was Evan. He stood behind me, looking Julian up and down with a frown. Who's this? Her ex, Julian answered for me. Then, looking confusedly at the man who looked so much like him, only far more handsome, he asked me, and who's he? Evan glanced at Julian, then at his own reflection in the window, and a slow, roguish smile spread across his face. Her first love. He added, I was before you. Julian stared. He looked from Evan to me, and it was like a light bulb went off. He pointed at me in disbelief. You were using me, as a substitute? My secret was out. My face burned. I said nothing. Julian looked at me, then at the premium version of himself standing there, and finally, unable to accept it, he turned and stormed out. Evan scoffed. As if he could ever be a substitute for me. He looked down at me. Wild child, your taste has really gone downhill, hasn't it? I hated that nickname. I frowned. If you have something to say, say it. And stop calling me wild child. The name Wild Child came from a time when my love for Evan was wild and all-consuming. He'd given me the nickname with a laugh. Back then, I was a love-struck fool, the kind who would do anything. I even remember the day he left, July 2nd. I posted on my social media that my life was meaningless and I was going to Clearwater Lake to end it all. Thinking about it now, I just want to cringe. It was so embarrassing and pathetic. But at the time, I really would have done it for Evan. The only reason I didn't was because when I got to Clearwater Lake, someone was being pulled from the water after nearly drowning. There was a huge crowd, and I couldn't even get close. After trying to push through for a bit, I suddenly lost the desire to jump. I couldn't do it with all those people watching. So I just kept living, like a zombie. The name Wild Child was a record of all my reckless courage and madness. It was a past I didn't want to revisit. Evan's smile faded. That question you asked me the other day, I've been thinking about it. I have an answer now. I was confused. What had I asked him? I couldn't remember. Evan continued, I don't like seeing you and Mark being all lovey-dovey, even if it's fake. And I'm not willing to be the third wheel. He grabbed my hand. Chloe, no one in this world has ever loved me as recklessly as you did. I've never felt a love like that again. Can you give me another chance? I froze, then pulled my hand away. I showed him my wedding ring and repeated, I'm married. Evan didn't care. The courthouse that marries you is the same one that grants divorces. He said, I used to be against marriage, but I'd get a license for you. If you get a divorce. I lowered my gaze, a faint, ironic smile on my lips. Years ago, I had desperately wanted a future with him, and he had run faster than anyone. Now that I was married, he was back, talking about a future together. I shook my head and pointed to my ring again. Mark put this on my finger. I won't accept anyone else. Evan was stunned. You and I were in love. You're telling me that doesn't mean more than some business arrangement? You said it yourself. I said, opening the gallery door. The past is the past. This is now. Evan was quiet for a moment, then he leaned in, a roguish smile returning. Wild child, since I was a kid, I've always gotten what I want. Oh, I said calmly, my mind already on the steak dinner I was going to have with Mark later. He patted my head. Just wait. I watched him walk away with that confident swagger and didn't think much of it. It was just a small hiccup in my otherwise peaceful life. But that night, just as Mark and I were falling asleep, a piercing ringtone jolted us awake. Mark answered the phone. His face changed. He quickly got dressed, tossed a I have to go out over his shoulder, and left. I thought it was something to do with his company. He had been in the middle of a major deal. I never, ever expected to see him a few hours later on a celebrity gossip site. The famous actress Mona had attempted suicide, and Mark, the heir to his family's fortune, was the one who rushed her to the hospital. He looked frantic. His shirt, usually buttoned perfectly, was done up wrong. He didn't seem to care. He jumped out of the ambulance and ran alongside the gurney into the hospital. I stared at my phone, a chill spreading through my body. My dad had his son, my mom had her new boyfriend. All I had was Mark. But Mark had more than just me. Oh, right. And then there was Evan. He called me. Wild child, come out for a drink. I looked at the video of Mark, a sharp pain twisting in my heart. After a few seconds of hesitation, I nodded. I don't know what possessed me, but I got up, showered, put on makeup and a short skirt, and got into Evan's car. We went to a bar and I drank myself into a stupor. Over the loud music, Evan leaned in close. See? Mark doesn't love you that much. Come back to me, okay? I didn't answer. Evan just smiled and kept drinking with me. We were both swaying. I vaguely remember him muttering something about how easy Mona was to manipulate, that a few words were all it took. But my head was spinning too much to make sense of it. I just kept drinking. Alcohol dribbled down my chin, and tears streamed down my face. As of tonight, I had no one. When we left the bar, Evan gently brushed my messy hair out of my face. Are you coming with me? I'll never leave you again. I looked at him, took a deep breath, and with the last shred of my sanity, I shook my head. My instincts told me no. I had a husband. I couldn't go with someone else. Evan seemed disappointed. But then he smiled again. It's okay. You'll come back to me one day. He had his driver take me home, watching me get into the car from the curb, his hands in his pockets, a look of absolute certainty on his face. I stumbled home, dazed, and collapsed onto the bed without showering or changing. In a hazy dream, just as dawn was breaking and sunlight streamed through the window, someone sat on the edge of my bed. He felt cold, like he'd just come in from outside. He sat there in silence for a long time, then began to change my clothes and wipe my face with a warm towel. Then he slipped into bed behind me and held me as I slept. Instinctively, I turned over and mumbled, "Honey." He just grunted, and patted my back, lulling me to sleep. When I woke up from my hangover, I was in Mark's arms. He smelled faintly of irises, the signature scent of a brand Mona endorsed. When we first got married, I didn't care about Mona's existence. But that was then, and this was now. Now, the thought of her was a physical pain in my chest. I quickly pulled away, shoving him as I got up and headed for the guest room. The push woke Mark. His eyes were bloodshot and he looked exhausted. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I paused, but didn't say anything. It was an arranged marriage. Technically, since I hadn't caught him in the act, I didn't even have the right to question him. The marriage certificate was meaningless in our twisted little world. But I couldn't stand it. I turned to him, my smile bright and polite, just like it had been before I'd started to have feelings for him. "I wouldn't want to get in the way of your heroic deeds." Mark reached for me, but I recoiled in disgust. Those were the hands that had rushed Mona to the hospital. He could save anyone else in the world, but Mona, I couldn't tolerate it. "I'm just that selfish. Don't touch me." "I just showered," I said, making up a lame excuse, completely forgetting that he was the one who had changed me into my pajamas. My look of disgust and my wary posture, one of them must have stung him. He slowly withdrew his hand and watched me walk into the guest room. Just as I was closing the door, he said softly, "There's nothing between her and me." "I told you that." Right. You're a regular white knight, a saint saving damsels in distress. That's why when she tried to kill herself, she didn't call anyone else, just you," I said with a sarcastic smile, then slammed the door. I wiped away a tear that had escaped. I thought I could live without anyone, even my unreliable parents. As long as I had Mark, I had a new family, a shelter from the storm, a place where I could move forward. But reality had just slapped me hard across the face. In the end, I was alone, sleeping in the guest room. A little while later, Mark knocked on the door. "Chloe, open up. Just talk." "I'm already in bed. I'm not getting up." Mark was silent for a moment, then said, "Give me one more week. In 1 week, Mona won't be calling me for anything anymore." Sensing my disbelief, he added with emphasis, "I promise you. I swear on everything I have." But I still didn't believe him. Even though I didn't believe him, I picked up my phone to check the date. 1 week from now would be July 2nd. What a coincidence. July 2nd must be my unlucky day. 5 years ago on July 2nd, Evan left me, and I decided to jump in a lake. 5 years later on July 2nd, Mark was promising to cut ties with his ex-girlfriend. I pulled the covers over my head and didn't answer him. I don't know when he left. All I know is that from that day on, Mark and I were in a cold war. The news about Mona spread so far that even my mother in Europe heard about it. She called me. "You need to have a baby, quickly. A child is the key to a strategic marriage. Look at what happened with your father. It was only because you married Mark that someone was there to handle it." I sighed, sincerely wishing my mother a wonderful time in Europe, and hoping she would stay there. A few days later, a new rumor started circulating in our social circle, me and Evan. It started with him being my first love and ended with me, in a short skirt, at a bar with him a few nights ago. The gossip was rampant. A paparazzo even snapped a photo and posted it online, sparking a wave of ridicule. The happy couple, both cheating. At least no one's losing out. The rumors intensified. Mark's family heard about it. I heard they even called him home to question him, and were starting to wonder, if I got pregnant, whose child it would be. Mark's sister-in-law called me in secret to tell me that his family thought I was indecent and were furious, on the verge of canceling their business partnership with my family. It was a signal. The next step would be to replace me. But Mark refused. He dug in his heels, insisting on seeing the partnership through. It infuriated his family. His sister-in-law sighed. Believe me, if I were the one in this mess, my husband would have thrown me out without a second thought. Defying the elders could mean losing the chance to lead the company one day. There was envy in her voice. So, you should be grateful. He might have made a small mistake with Mona, but when it matters, he's always on your side. He's even willing to stand up to his family to protect you. I didn't say anything. I knew that any other man wouldn't have risked his chance to run the family business to keep me. But I also knew that the more he did for me, the more I couldn't get over Mona. He was right about one thing: when I fall for someone, I'm all in, passionate and stubborn. I thought desperately, what am I supposed to do? The moment I fell in love, I developed this need for absolute fidelity. I couldn't stand the thought of him even touching another woman. When Mark came home that night, he was exhausted. The fight with his family must have drained him. As he was changing, he warned me, Evan has been ruthless since he was a kid. To get someone, he's not above destroying them first. His face was blank. Chloe, stay away from him. He won't make you happy. I pursed my lips. And you will? Mark looked at me. I will. I told you I would. I laughed, a loud, exaggerated sound. Why don't you go back to saving damsels in distress? Someone out there needs you more than I do. Mark's brow furrowed. I told you. On July 2nd, I will take care of everything. I shrugged. He could say whatever he wanted. I wasn't going to believe him. If I had to be alone for the rest of my life, so be it. But I would not turn a blind eye just to have a family. I figured it was time to start thinking about a divorce. I wasn't cut out for this kind of marriage. I just wasn't made of the right stuff. Sorry, Mom and Dad. The only bright spot was that my gallery was doing well, becoming quite well known in the city. One evening, I was invited to an art exhibition. To my surprise, I saw Mark there. I glanced at the invitation again and belatedly realized that the host was an arts organization that Mark had been funding for years. I pretended not to see him and moved to the other side of the room, only to run into my pathetic ex, Julian. He was already drunk, and when he saw me, he lunged forward to grab my hand, but Mark appeared and slapped it away. Julian didn't seem to care. He grabbed onto Mark and started ranting. I, Julian, have been a genius my whole life. What woman wouldn't love me? He pointed at me accusingly. But this woman, she has no taste. She dared to use me as a substitute. He pointed at his own face, shouting to the crowd that was gathering around us, her first love looks exactly like me. She dated me just to use me as a stand-in. Does she have any morals at all? I didn't really care about Julian's meltdown. He had cheated on me first, but I couldn't help but glance at Mark's face. He didn't look surprised at all. Or angry. I lowered my head and let out a disappointed laugh. He didn't care, so he was completely unfazed. I cleared my throat and interrupted Julian, a bit deliberately. That's ridiculous. My first love is way better looking than you. You're just the budget version. Ugh. That ugh wasn't an exaggeration of my disgust. I actually felt sick. Suddenly, my stomach churned, and I almost threw up. I clapped a hand over my mouth and ran for the restroom. My high heels were unsteady, and I stumbled as I ran. Someone caught my arm, steadying me. I turned to see Mark, his face a grim mask. He guided me toward the restroom, asking flatly as we walked, "Your first love is way better looking than him?" I couldn't speak. If I opened my mouth, I would vomit. Once in the restroom, I retched, emptying my stomach until only bile was left. Mark stood beside me, patting my back and handing me water to rinse my mouth, his frown deepening. When we came out, he took my wine glass and stuck by my side for the rest of the night, keeping others away and refusing to let me drink. People around us were sighing, "Mr. Mark is so good to his wife." Only I felt sick, physically sick and sick at heart. When he rushed Mona to the hospital, I wondered if he was this attentive. Mark's bodyguards dragged Julian out, and the silence was a relief. But my stomach was still in knots. I barely made it through the end of the exhibition. I was too exhausted to drive, so Mark ended up helping me into his car. Not that I had a choice. His expression was so stern, he wouldn't have taken no for an answer. When we got home, I forced myself to take off my makeup and change, but Mark slipped out for a moment. He came back with a small box. I looked down. It was a pregnancy test. I looked at him, confused. "What for?" He was still serious. "Go take it." I didn't want to. All I wanted was to sleep. I was exhausted from throwing up. And I couldn't stop thinking, is he so familiar with this routine because he's practiced it with Mona? A wave of anger, completely beyond my control, washed over me. It was like my hormones had been hijacked. The words just spilled out. "I'm already planning to divorce you. You can have some other woman take this test in the future." Mark's face darkened. "Why?" I was incredibly irritable tonight, my emotions spiraling. I have no idea why, but I pushed his hand away. "Because it's an arranged marriage. I'm not strong enough. I can't sleep with a man I have no feelings for, okay?" Mark took off his glasses, his sharp eyes narrowing as he stared at me. After a moment, he put them back on and pointed to the bathroom. "Are you going to take it yourself, or do I have to help you?" I thought I must have misheard him. "Help me with something you do in the bathroom?" Had he picked up some weird new fetish? I opened my mouth to say something sarcastic, but when I saw him actually start walking toward the bathroom, like he meant it, I snapped my mouth shut. I silently went to the bathroom, took the test, left it on the counter, and crawled into bed, exhausted. I slept until morning. I didn't even realize I had slept in our old bedroom, not the guest room I'd been using. When I woke up, Mark was already awake. He said flatly, "The test was positive." Before I could even process it, he added, "The child is almost certainly mine, and I intend for it to be raised in the Mark family. Once you give birth, you'll have fulfilled your side of our arrangement. You can choose to leave or we can live separate lives." His face was expressionless, as if he didn't care at all. "I won't force you to stay." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" He wanted the baby, not the mother. "Is that it?" "The second I'm pregnant, he wants me gone. He wants me to hand over the baby and my position to Mona or some other woman." The hormones that had been out of control since last night surged again. I sat up in bed with a cold laugh. "I'll raise the child. In fact, I can leave today." Then I threw one last parting shot at him. "I must have been blind to have ever fallen for a scumbag like you." Mark froze. He grabbed my arm. "What did you just say?" "I didn't hear you." I yanked my arm away. "I said you're a scumbag." He grabbed me again. The sentence before that. I wrenched free once more. That I must have been blind. Furious, I stormed back to the guest room, too angry to sleep. But for some reason, Mark seemed happy. He was whistling as he left for work. That just made me even angrier. Shortly after Mark left, the house manager from the main family estate showed up. Since we'd just gotten married, we'd only been using a cleaning service, not live-in staff. But now the house manager was here with 2 other people, giving them strict instructions. "This is the young Mrs. Mark, carrying Mr. Mark's child. You must take excellent care of her. Mr. Mark is very concerned. I was completely bewildered, watching the house manager go on and on. I seized a moment when he paused for breath. What's all this about? The house manager beamed. Mr. Mark hired them to take care of you. Behind him, a driver was holding a mountain of shopping bags. These are special skincare products, makeup, and clothes for expectant mothers. Mr. Mark ordered all of it. You're very lucky, Mrs. Mark. He's thought of everything. The mention of Mark's name just made me angrier. My face fell, but it was his house, and he could do what he wanted. I turned and went back to my room, answering a call on my way. It was Evan. He sounded incredibly agitated. You're pregnant? How did you know? I heard Evan light a cigarette and take a long drag. Mark called to tell me. Said he wanted to take me out for a celebratory dinner. That bastard. I was speechless. Nothing was even certain yet. Why was Mark announcing it to the world? I didn't even know what I was going to do about the baby. Evan asked, how are you going to leave with me now? When did I ever say I was leaving with you? Evan's voice grew heavy. You know why I came back. You have to leave with me. Evan had been spoiled his whole life, a young master who always got his way. I used to fall for that, but now, I wasn't in the mood to put up with anyone's demands. I hung up. Evan called again, but I didn't answer. He relentlessly tried to add me on social media, but I ignored the requests. A little while later, he sent me a text, let me show you whether that baby is worth keeping. I didn't pay it any mind. I wasn't going out, so what could he possibly show me? 2 hours later, I realized I was wrong. I didn't have to go out. Evan could just send someone to my door. Mona, with a bandage wrapped around her arm, showed up at my house. I didn't let her in. She stood outside, crying. If you're really pregnant, I'll disappear forever. I'll never dream of being with Mark again. I laughed coldly. Mark and I are married. Whether I'm pregnant or not, you shouldn't be dreaming about someone else's husband. Mona stared, then started crying again. But I can't let him go. 5 years ago, he risked his life for me. He jumped in to save me when I was drowning, and he can't even swim. He was willing to die for me. How can I just let that go? A tremor went through me. Mona pulled out her phone and showed me a news article from 5 years ago. It was clear as day, Mark had saved Mona. He'd even received a Good Samaritan award. I felt a chill, and a sense of absurdity. A woman Mark was willing to die for, how could he ever give her up for an arranged marriage? And if that was the case, why did he agree to the marriage in the first place? I even remembered Mark's sister-in-law telling me that our marriage was Mark's choice. He had picked my family from several options. He chose me. It wasn't my family who had pushed for it. Did he choose me just to play the villain and break up his own great love story? Mona was still crying. Has Mark ever risked his life for you? I shook my head. No. Oh. That's why you don't understand, Mona said. When a man is willing to die for you, it's very hard to let go. If Mark ever does that for you, you'll know how I feel. I was silent for a moment, then gritted my teeth. I don't need that. Please leave. Mona wouldn't go. She just stood at the door, refusing to leave. I was forced to call Mark. Mona's at the door. Come get her. Not even half an hour later, I heard the roar of an engine as Mark's car sped up to the house. I laughed to myself. When it came to Mona, he would move heaven and earth. Mark walked up the steps, his face like stone. Mona rushed forward to grab his sleeve, but he pulled her over to the car. I couldn't hear what they were saying. After a moment, Mona stopped crying and obediently got into the car. Mark turned and looked at me standing in the doorway. I'm taking her home. Wait for me. Then he drove away. I stared at the taillights until they disappeared, then lowered my head and smiled. What was I even hoping for? That I was his one true love? I turned around, went to the bedroom, and started packing. A few minutes later, I walked out of the house, pulling a suitcase behind me. I couldn't stay in this house anymore. By the time Mark realized I was gone and called me, I was already at a resort deep in the mountains. Green mountains, clear streams, a charming brick inn, it was the perfect place to clear my head. He was saying something on the phone, something about July 2nd, something about 5 years, but the reception in the mountains was terrible. I could only catch bits and pieces, so I just hung up. Mark's life was no longer my concern. Once I had sorted myself out, I would go back and deal with the baby and the marriage. This whole arranged marriage thing, I just wasn't cut out for it. I spent 2 days wandering through the mountains, picking fruit and listening to the gurgling streams. My mood slowly began to lift. I finally picked up my phone, curious to see if anyone had tried to contact me. The signal was truly awful. I had to walk around for a while before any of my apps would even open. The moment one did, I regretted it. The screen was flooded with news about Mark and Mona. I tried to close the page, but the weak signal caused a lag, forcing me to read the headline and date. Mark Industries heir denies relationship with actress Mona, claims he was just looking after her as a favor to a friend. The date, July 2nd. I tried to open the article to read more, but a light rain started to fall. I sighed, got up, and started walking back to the inn. Less than 10 minutes later, I realized something was wrong. The light drizzle had turned into a torrential downpour. I was soaked to the bone, with nowhere to take shelter. I looked at the terrain around me and a sense of dread washed over me. I was in a low-lying valley, surrounded by mountains. I quickened my pace, running through the rain back to the inn. By the time I got there, the water was already up to my calves. The wooden benches in the courtyard were floating. I climbed onto a stone table in the yard and tried to call for help. No signal at all. My heart sank. In what felt like seconds, the water rose to the tabletop, a roaring, relentless flood. I clutched my stomach, my mind blank with terror. Even though I had been planning to deal with the baby, on the brink of death, I couldn't help but think that this child hadn't even had a chance to be born. It had never even seen its parents. The thought made me want to call Mark. But my damn phone, a single bar of signal appeared for a second, the call connected, and then it dropped. I took a deep breath and looked down at my feet. It was impossible to run for higher ground now. I couldn't believe it. My dad didn't care about me, my mom barely did, my ex was a mess, and my new love was a cheat. And now I wasn't even going to get a decent death. What kind of crappy fate was this? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I jumped down and started wading through the water, hoping to find a piece of wood, anything to float on. But by the time the water was up to my waist, all I had found was a bucket with a hole in it. Useless. I was numb. I was cold, angry, and terrified. My phone was waterlogged and dead. The sky grew dark. I climbed back onto the table. The water was up to my chest, almost over my head. I knew, with a sense of despair, that I was done for. I started thinking about how I could die with a shred of dignity, how to not end up as a bloated corpse. Then I just broke down and screamed at the sky, "What the hell did I do wrong? Why are you doing this to me?" Maybe I was screaming so loud, or maybe I was hallucinating from fear, but I swear the heavens answered me. The voice was hoarse, but it was nice to listen to. "Chloe, don't be afraid. It's going to be okay." That just made me more scared. Was this some kind of grim reaper here to take me away? I rubbed my eyes, trying to see through the downpour, searching for the source of the voice. And then I saw him, and I was stunned. Mark was swimming toward me. I thought I had to be seeing things. But 10 minutes later, he struggled to my side, climbed onto the table, and tucked me under his arm, swimming toward the roof of the inn. I bit my lip, hard. The pain made me hiss. It was real. Mark was here. He heaved me onto the roof and pulled himself up after me, looking at the rising floodwaters below. "Help is on the way. Don't be afraid." I was still in shock. I stared at him. How did you know I was here? Mark wiped the rain from his face and pulled me into a tight embrace, like he'd just been pulled back from the brink himself. After a moment, his voice was trembling. I checked the browsing history on your iPad. This was in it. You called me, and I had someone track your location. His whole body was shaking. He was shaking so much I started to wonder if he was the one who was scared. Whether you want a divorce or want to run off with Evan, I'll let you go. Just promise me you won't run off like this again. I was shivering from the cold, but I couldn't help but argue. When did I ever say I was running off with Evan? Mark froze. But you wanted a divorce. That's because of you and Mona and your inappropriate relationship. I shouted, getting a mouthful of rain. Mark frowned and raised a hand to shield my face from the downpour. How many times do I have to tell you there's nothing between us? Did you see the statement I released? I huddled in his arms. Even sitting on a rooftop in a storm, my curiosity got the better of me. Then why did you wait until July 2nd to release it? Mark fell silent. He looked at me, a hint of unease in his eyes. After a moment, he mumbled something over the roar of the rain. I couldn't hear him. I was about to ask again, but the rescue team arrived, pulling us both from danger. When we were brought to safety, Mark's driver was waiting at the foot of the mountain. He was overjoyed to see us. Mrs. Mark, it's so good to see you're okay. You have no idea, Mr. Mark is terrified of water, but he just plunged right in. We couldn't stop him. I stared at Mark, stunned, trying to remember the past few hours. I didn't recall Mark seeming afraid at all. At most, he was just shaking from the cold. After we got out of the mountains, it felt like a wall between Mark and me had come down. No matter what, he had saved my life. I couldn't keep giving him the cold shoulder. Besides, I was still dying to know what he had said on that rooftop. I wasn't as strong as Mark. I came down with a high fever, but thankfully, the baby was fine. Mark stayed by my side, never leaving for a moment. I was delirious with fever, but I still hadn't forgotten my question. What did you say on the mountain? I can't rest until you tell me. Mark looked at me, my face flushed with fever but my eyes stubbornly open, and sighed. I said, I promised Mona's brother I would pretend to be her boyfriend for 5 years. The agreement ended on July 2nd. If you don't believe me, I'll take you to see her brother. That made me sit bolt upright. You were dating Mona for her brother's sake? This is way too complicated. Mark gave me a sip of water and gently pushed me back down. I was drowning once, and her brother saved me. When he found out who I was, he made me promise to protect Mona in the entertainment industry for 5 years, under the guise of being her boyfriend, to keep her safe from predatory producers. After 5 years, when he came back from studying abroad, would be free. I was getting more and more confused. I was starting to think he was lying. But you were swimming just fine back there. How could you have been drowning? Then I remembered what Mona had said about Mark risking his life to save her, and a sour feeling crept into my heart. And what about you risking your life to save Mona? What was that all about? Mark was visibly uncomfortable. He stammered, unable to answer. I sat up again, furious. Mark pushed me back down, looking helpless. That day, I saw a post on social media from a girl saying she was going to kill herself. I rushed to the lake to save her. But it turned out Mona was also jumping into the lake at the same time. I wasn't wearing my glasses, so I got them mixed up and jumped in after her. My swimming isn't that great, and I almost got pulled under. Luckily, Mona's brother got there just in time and saved us both. He sighed. I ended up getting a Good Samaritan award for it, and when her brother found out who I was, he asked me to protect her. He said Mona was too beautiful and would be taken advantage of in the industry. But how could you have mistaken who was jumping into the lake? I was still skeptical. Something flickered in my mind, but my feverish brain couldn't quite grasp it. I held my head, thinking hard, and then it hit me. 5 years ago on July 2nd, I was the one who posted on social media about jumping in the lake. I sat up again, staring at Mark in disbelief. You're not talking about me, are you? I had never seen Mark look so flustered. He gave a quick nod, then immediately turned to look out the window. I was so confused. I grabbed my new phone and scrolled through my contacts. I remembered adding Mark after we got married. I scrolled through the list. They were all familiar names, except for one. It was a girl who had added me once, saying she wanted to discuss art. She never spoke to me again after that. I looked at Mark, then at the girl's profile picture, then back at Mark. Wait a second, that girl, she looked a little bit like Mark. My stare must have been too much for him. Mark reached over and took my phone. Stop looking. It was me. I was pretending to be a girl to keep tabs on you. The photo is my cousin. I was silent. A heavy, awkward silence. Other than silence, I didn't know how to react. After a long time, I finally managed to squeeze out a sentence. So, we've known each other for a while, huh? Mark, his face red, nodded. Longer than you think. Why were you spying on me? I wrapped my arms around myself. You'd better have a good reason. Mark's face turned an even deeper shade of red. He had blushed more in the last few minutes than I had ever seen him blush in my entire life. He swallowed. Back then, Evan told me about this girl who was so devoted and stubborn that it almost scared him. He was afraid he would actually fall for her and be trapped. I was curious, so I went to take a look. He caressed my cheek. And then I saw you. So reckless, like a moth to a flame, loving someone without asking for anything in return. Back then, you only had eyes for Evan, but I never forgot the way you looked when you were in love. I couldn't get it out of my head. So you pretended to be a girl to spy on me? I still couldn't get over it. Mark rubbed his nose. I couldn't exactly add you with my own account. You were crazy about Evan back then. It would have looked like I was trying to steal you away. But you never confessed after Evan left, I said, a smile creeping onto my face as I watched him squirm. Mark rubbed his nose again. I had a girl's profile picture. How was I supposed to confess? No matter how I put it, I'd sound like a creep. Watching him, so clumsy and awkward, a complete departure from the usual composed Mark, I felt a grin spread across my face. So, is the Mona situation resolved now? Yes. Her brother is back, so I've handed her over to him. My promise is fulfilled. I nodded. And what about me? Mark looked up. What about you? I raised an eyebrow. You spied on me, you pissed me off, you made me run to the mountains and almost drown. How are you going to make it up to me? Mark looked so nervous it almost made me feel bad for teasing him. I slowly pinned his female persona chat to the top of my contacts, my eyes crinkling with laughter. As punishment, from now on, you can only talk to me using this account, with this profile picture. I'm not calling you Mark anymore. I'm calling you Amy. And you're not allowed to change it. Mark's face went crimson. He struggled with himself for a moment, then finally nodded. Whatever makes you happy. I looked at the chat, at the picture of the sunny, smiling girl drinking bubble tea, and I burst out laughing, rolling back and forth on the bed. Mark, mortified, got up to find the doctor and ask about my condition. I watched his tall figure retreat, thought about that tiny, cute profile picture, and started laughing all over again. A phone call finally interrupted me. I answered, still chuckling. Hello? It was Evan. He sounded anxious and frantic. What are you doing? Where are you? I've been looking for you for 3 days. Where have you been? My good mood vanished. Why are you yelling at me? What do you want? Evan paused, then said, I heard you were missing for a few days. I've been looking everywhere for you. Wild child, I've thought it over. I don't care that you're pregnant. Just come with me. Without you, I'll never find anyone like you again. I lowered my eyes. A few years ago, those were the words I had longed to hear. But now. I touched my stomach, then looked at Mark, who was standing in the doorway. A smile touched my lips. A missed chance is a missed chance. What's lost is lost. Evan, not everyone will wait for you. I'm Mark's wife now, and I'm carrying his child. Wherever he is, that's my home. There was a long silence on the other end. I grew impatient and hung up first. Some people, you're just destined to lose. And some people, you're destined to be with. I waved at Mark. Honey, when I'm better, let's go home. Mark smiled back, his face bright and sunny. Okay. Let's go home.